Welcome back to F1 Blogs, your go-to channel for the latest Formula One news and insights. Today, we're talking about yet another penalty for Max Verstappen, who's hit a rough patch with race sanctions lately. This time, he picked up a costly 5-second penalty after a risky move against Oscar Piastri under the virtual safety car, VSC, conditions in the Brazilian Grand Prix sprint race. Let's dive into exactly what happened and how this impacts Verstappen's championship lead. Stay tuned to the end, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth F1 analysis. Verstappen's overtake attempt under virtual safety car goes wrong. Max Verstappen, currently leading the drivers' standings, made a bold but ultimately penalized move on the last lap of the sprint race in Brazil. Attempting to pass Oscar Piastri before the VSC period officially ended, Verstappen crossed the timing threshold 0.63 seconds too soon, an error that didn't escape the attention of the FIA. According to the race officials, Verstappen's car was slightly under the minimum required delta when the VSC lights turned green, indicating he gained an advantage. Although he didn't manage to pass Piastri, the move was enough to trigger a 5-second penalty. The FIA statement explained, the driver was 0.63 seconds below the required minimum time when the VSC END lights turned green. This indicates a sporting advantage was obtained under VSC. Verstappen reportedly received a warning about his pace and attempted to correct it, but wasn't able to slow down in time when the green light activated. Despite his explanation, the penalty was enforced, as the FIA panel emphasized that his timing position under VSC gave him an unfair advantage on track. Another point lost, Leclerc takes advantage. The penalty, though minor, was still enough to drop Verstappen down one position in the sprint race standings. Instead of finishing ahead of Ferrari's Charles Leclerc, Verstappen was demoted to a place behind, giving Leclerc the advantage. This means Verstappen only picked up 5 points for his finish in the sprint instead of 6. His lead over rival Lando Norris is now trimmed down from 45 to 44 points, small, but noticeable in a season where every point counts. This penalty adds to a growing list of recent setbacks for Verstappen, who was already penalized this weekend for an engine component change, and just last week received time penalties in Mexico following incidents with Norris. A streak of penalties for Verstappen, a pattern emerging? In the past few races, Verstappen has found himself repeatedly under the scrutiny of race officials. Between Mexico and Brazil alone, he's racked up 4 penalties in 2 weeks, an unusual streak for the Dutch driver, who is generally known for his aggressive but calculated racing style. However, these recent incidents show that he may be pushing the limits a bit too far, at a cost that's adding up on the scoreboard. This penalty is particularly frustrating because, ultimately, his attempt to pass Piastri didn't even succeed. In fact, it was a failed move that only served to shift him back behind Leclerc, losing him a point in the championship standings. Given the intensity of his rivalry with Norris, these small point losses could make a difference as the season comes to a close. Penalties from Brazil to Mexico, the price of aggressive driving. It's worth noting that Verstappen's aggressive approach has led to similar incidents recently. At the Mexican Grand Prix, he was penalized twice with 10-second stops after on-track clashes with Norris. Just yesterday, he received another grid penalty for taking on a 6th internal combustion engine, ICE, of the season, adding 5 places to his starting position in tomorrow's Brazilian GP. Altogether, Verstappen's recent penalties highlight the risks involved in his current approach. He's a driver who isn't afraid to push boundaries, but in this case, it appears that the FIA has been keeping a close eye on his actions. Verstappen's persistent penalties signal that the officials may be less willing to let things slide when it comes to aggressive moves, especially during high-stakes races where drivers are fighting for every possible point. What's next for Verstappen and the championship battle? With his lead over Norris now slightly reduced, Verstappen will have to stay focused and disciplined to avoid further penalties in the final races of the season. He still maintains a strong lead, but if these small point losses continue to add up, it could impact his final standing. While his recent penalties haven't severely impacted his championship chances, another streak of incidents could potentially give Norris an opening to close the gap further. As the season nears its end, Verstappen's strategy will likely come under scrutiny not only from fans but from within his team. His determination to seize every position possible is admirable, but as we've seen today, sometimes restraint can be just as valuable as aggression. The question remains, can Verstappen find the right balance to secure his championship lead, or will these repeated penalties end up costing him in the long run? Conclusion: in the fast-paced world of Formula One, every move on the track counts, and Verstappen's penalty under the virtual safety car in Brazil proves just that. With each infraction, he edges closer to potentially impacting his standing as the leader of the championship. We'll see how this affects his momentum in tomorrow's main event, but one thing's clear, the pressure is on for Verstappen to avoid further penalties in these last few races. Thank you for joining us here at F1 Blogs. If you enjoyed this analysis and want more updates on all things F1, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out. See you next time for more F1 insights.